I think you brought some stuff to show us of what's been going on at Tumblr, right?
Yes.
So if we want to cue that presentation.
This is the most mesmerizing slideshow of all time. So if I bungle, this is my failsafe. If I'm boring or if I bungle anything, you'll always have something beautiful to look at. But what this really is just, a lot of people feel like Tumblr's new, and maybe we're new in how we're introducing ourselves to the world, especially with brands. But the truth is we are one of the older platforms, despite the fact that we're known to have a grip on youth culture, right? We've been around since 2007, and really what we wanted to show everyone here, without talking to it too much, is just the vast breadth and variety and quality of brand advertising and content that you see on our platform. So that'll be floating by. And if, for example, any of you want to know something specific as far as an anecdote or a story, just we could maybe save that for the Q&A.
Totally. So I think you guys just launched a new initiative, right? Year in Review. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that's all about and what's going on?
Yes. So one of the new things, there's been tons of stuff. We only have 30 minutes, so there's so many new things I could talk about that are going on, but yearinreview.tumblr.com launched last night, right? So I think that if anyone here has installed Tumblr and played with the app a little bit, but maybe you couldn't figure out how to run your own blog, or you're thinking of signing up for an account and learning more, probably the single best way, the single greatest way to learn about our grip on content is to just go to yearinreview.tumblr.com. That's our annual year-end ranking, right, of all of the best stuff that's happening on Tumblr. So last night I saw categories for most reblogged actor, which would be Benedict Cumberbatch, of course. He's the most reblogged actor. His fandom on Tumblr, they're called the Cumberbitches.
They named themselves that.
I just want to know that I did not make that up. That's what they call themselves. They call themselves the Cumberbitches, but that's the fandom that kind of helped elevate him to the #1 spot for the second year in a row. And there's all types of great quirky categories. There's standard categories like the most popular news items, the most popular brand blogs, the most popular video game properties, but then there's quirky stuff in there as well. So that's a great thing for everyone here to check out.
Cool. And I know that Tumblr has definitely been growing since it started. And how are you seeing the demographics changing? Who makes up the Tumblr audience for the marketers in the room who are interested in reaching them?
Well, surprisingly, even though we're known to have a strong grip with millennials, and we're still kind of, I think what we've been able to do, especially since the Yahoo acquisition, is add an older audience as well. I might bungle this, but 55% above the age of 35. So what's great is that you see youth culture and you see millennials on Tumblr constantly kind of break the platform and move it in one direction, but we're also able to talk to brands and offer them tons of access to an older user as well. So that's a huge change that's happened. And you also begin to see it with the types of brands that have come on, the type of work that they're doing, speaking to an older audience.
So speaking of that, which brands are coming on that you think are really doing it right? Who should we be watching? Who are the brands? And I know that maybe Dennys caught your eye a little bit because I think someone from Dennys went maybe to your team.
Yes. So this is my history of loving what a brand is doing so much that I have to figure out who on the agency side or who on the brand side is able to get Tumblr that quickly. And we actually were fortunate because Dennys.tumblr.com is easily a top 10 blog. I think it's a top 10 just social media profile that I've ever seen because of how innovative and risk-taking it is. But we were fortunate to get Amber, who ran that account, over to my team, and now she's working and helping all types of brands craft personas like that. On the Hunger Games, what was fascinating is that we always had this saying that we were throwing around called in-world, right? Rather than saying ARG or viral marketing, it was in-world was the new way or the new construct to imagine what we were doing with all these disparate social properties. We wanted to constantly stay in-world. And that had a whole playbook, and it had a whole set of guidelines around how you could talk about things. Dennys, I think, is really one of the first brands to really put a stamp on the idea of in-character. And the character or persona that they created basically simulates that really, really sarcastic, but really, really intelligent millennial that might be in a Denny's diner at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Kind of observing pop culture and observing youth culture and also constantly blogging and uploading things on their phone. And that's really what Dennys as a brand has been able to do, is they've been able to like speak that language and instantly attract all of Tumblr. Another cool thing they do is just the way that they play with language and vocabulary and words. I think they must have someone that just sits and observes all new trends that are happening, and then they'll immediately make a piece of media, or they'll type something and purposely misspell it, or they'll use like a noun as a verb, which all the young kids are doing. You have to like, it's not cool to say cool anymore unless you spell it Kewl. But Dennys always knows the right way to do things like that, and that's part of why they're so successful.
That's interesting, and I think as we develop, one of the things that we've seen are brands are really relying on social platforms and people like yourself, creators who understand the space, to work directly with them. Now, you guys do work with brands to develop programs and help them along in their programming and what they're doing, correct?
Yeah, there's going back to 2012, like, we have tons and tons of great examples of brands working with our creators. Creators is like, it's kind of, rather than saying artist, we have been saying creator from the beginning, and it's basically our way of letting everyone know that anyone who comes onto Tumblr, just simply by curating, let's say 3 pieces of content that you love, just the act of curation within itself is a form of creation. That throws people for a loop at first, but anyone that's like looked at window dressing, or someone that works in a gallery that's curated, for example, the art behind us, like that within itself is an art. And when we look at creators, we've started to pair brands with artists in a little bit more aggressive way. I think that Disney with the Looking Glass, where they sent some of our photographers throughout Disney parks and they took tons of great photos, uploaded those to their blog, is a really, really great example. Another good example is JCPenney's, which is live right now. That's the usofyou.tumblr.com, like the US of you. And that has tons of our artists doing self-portraits. Some pieces of content have a JCPenney's product worked in, and then they're answering questions at the bottom that are the same from artist to artist, like what inspires you, what are your working methods, like where do you create? So this opportunity is something that we've begun experimenting with this past year. We haven't talked about it too much, but it's definitely something that brands have really gravitated to, is the opportunity to work with our creators.
Cool. And when you talk about artists, what formats do these artists create in? Is it new? Is it different?
Oh my God, there are formats that I don't even know what to call them half the time. There's this one artist in Sweden that buys Nike shoes and then shreds them and deconstructs them, drips splatter paint all over them, photographs and contents his journey, turns them into GIFs, and then posts them online. And it's basically like fashion as deconstruction, as art, but the content gets collected, and then obviously he also sells the things that he recreates back out to the public. But that's a more extreme example. I mean, because we have 7 post types on Tumblr, you can post text, video, photos, GIFs, quotes, chat conversations. Because we play with all media types, where some platforms play with one, we also have a high breadth of artistry across all those media forms. So we've got typographers, illustrators, GIF artists, filmmakers, writers, poets. We've had 83 blogs turned into books, so our literary community is actually really, really huge. And that's probably why, at the end of the day, I think one of the most profound things, especially for brands, is when they finally decide to give Tumblr a chance, they really begin to understand why we're #1 for content and why we hold like the ranking of #1 for time spent. Because there's so many different types of content coming at you as opposed to just photos or just videos. And that's actually something you'll see on Year in Review, is just the breadth and depth of content coming at you.
Very cool. Yes, I heard you could find out, was it the most popular color of the year
Yeah,
today?
yeah. The most popular color is actually, it's like a turquoise. But what's cool is that we don't just put up the standard categories that everyone wants to know, but there's also all types of like weird, crazy categories. You'll see them come up every single day, and it just speaks to kind of like the humor of our platform.
Very cool. Some of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier when we were chatting, I know that there's a lot of people who do gaming here in the audience. And
did anyone just see that Xbox post that flipped by? Yes, that's one of the most popular video game posts that have ever been put out.
Go Xbox.
Yes.
So one of the things we were talking about earlier is you guys in your actual ad units, and I know we're talking a lot about content and great content, but you can also buy advertising. But one of the units you guys are just rolling out is around installs specifically for games and mobile games. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how that works or what
Sure.
that is.
So it's a pilot program, and I don't have stats to share because there's a lot of tests still going on, but it's really, really exciting, and there's two reasons. The first is because people have seen app install ad products on other platforms, and that's great. But typical Tumblr, while we might be a little bit delayed to the game of CPI-based plays for brands where you can drive users to install an app, the thing that I love about what we've done is we've continued to really, really hammer home the idea of helping the brand make great content and helping the brand aspire to turn their advertising into art. Because if they can make content that is as good as art and as collectible, they'll receive great engagement. And we consistently rank #1 in all types of amazing categories for engagement, whether it's sentiment around content, longevity of content, collectability, and so on. So these new sponsored app posts that you see brands putting out, they have, for example, I saw a great one from the game Two Dots, the sequel to Dots. I'm sure everyone here has played it like a million times.
Who
on
plays
an iPhone.
Dots?
Does everyone play Dots? Yes.
Nice. If you
Everyone
don't,
that's
you
not
should.
raising their hand does play Dots. You know, it's like normally you'd see that and it would just be like, play the new game called Dots, install it now. That would be your basic CPI play on maybe another in-stream platform, but we have like all these cool GIFs of users receiving high scores and reaching final stages of the game and also just interacting with it. And that content itself is collectible. It never strikes anyone as an ad or advertising. It happens to have an install button below it. And that makes me really excited, is just thinking about the whole breadth of apps and gaming communities that this new unit can reach. I was looking over kind of some of the tidbits that we've put out as to why we went down this path, and just learned that we reach like a quarter of all gamers, right? And gamers like come to us at a much higher degree than they do other platforms. They spend a longer amount of time in our platform and so on. So that's what excites me from a gaming perspective. But then the other thing is, I think from a deeper level, just the idea that we spend so much time inside these streams and we spend so much time consuming content, right? Whether that's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. What's weird about it is that all of the content and all of the channels are just these tall, narrowly shaped columns. And almost all of our time spent, probably in our lives, is just staring at portrait-shaped devices just swiping downwards. That's not exclusive to Tumblr. It's just the new physical construct that holds all this content is just tall and narrow, right? You spend all this time, you reblog, you interact with content, but with these new units, now we can drive all types of new actions out of the stream. So what you might see as install now could become something else next year. And that's what excites me as far as activating people that are sitting inside these streams to take new types of actions.
Very cool. You mentioned experimenting, and I think that's kind of been a theme of what we've been talking about today. What is your guys', I mean, you're obviously launching products that are still, you know, sort of experimentation. What's your guys' philosophy on what you do in terms of experimentation? What would you encourage brands to do?
Okay, so Tumblr has told me I'm only allowed to quote Brian Eno once per conference, but he has this profound quote that I always kind of hold on to, especially when I'm training people on my team, which is work quickly and leave the mistakes in, right? And I always say mistake your way across the finish line. And it's a practice that we try to get brands to accept. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's easy, but I think it speaks to the idea of iterative improvement and just putting your voice out there, starting to experiment with content, and working your way through the problems in an active mindset. Because unfortunately, you know, brands that sit it out and say, well, we're just not ready yet, we don't have the perfect infrastructure and so on, if you're not actually posting inside that stream that we all spend so much time in, then you don't exist. And that's unfortunate, but it's just the truth, because people are staring here and you're just not there. So we really take a strong and active role trying to help brands experiment and figure out what the right voice and tone is, to my point earlier about Dennys, or like what the right number of frames are to put in the GIF so that someone's eye is more attracted to it, so they're more likely to stop in the stream and reblog it. And sometimes it takes a longer amount of time. I'd say for most brands, they end up coming into Tumblr and they love it. It's like it's an amazing roller coaster ride, and they end up instantly seeing how engagement can really like boost buy-in, say internally, around coming onto a new platform.
Cool. So I've just got a couple more questions, and then I think if you guys have some questions, I'll open it up and let you guys ask, so get your questions ready. But what do you think is in store for 2015 with Tumblr, with social, with brands and marketing? What is your prediction for next year?
Oh my God, it's the question.
It is the question.
Well, what was surprising is that native advertising was this big, dominant thing at conferences and panels, and it's really hard to explain because it's got like 15 different definitions, and that to me was what 2013 was. And then I was not prepared for the fact that it quickly switched to content marketing in 2014. It was like everyone wants to talk about content marketing, much easier to explain, much less intimidating, and kind of in some ways much less divisive. Right? For everyone agrees that content marketing is something we want to jump into. Not everyone agrees whether native advertising is right or wrong and so on and all that. I think next year is really about content creation. Because, all of the content that you see float by was made by someone, and everyone here probably thinks of themselves as a marketer to some degree, and probably says, well, I'm established in my career. I'm here at a conference. I'm learning things, but like I know what I'm doing. I don't need help marketing per se, but I might need help creating content. I might need help creating content that people want to engage with, that that can be made at high quality and quickly, and with a unique point of view. And that's something that I think next year we're really going to try to help brands a lot more aggressively with.
Very good. All right. Do we have any questions out there? I think we've got to have at least one.
Does everyone love all the great content that they're seeing?
No questions on how any of this was created? Yes.
From a video perspective, so much of Tumblr has been image-based.
Yes.
With Yahoo now coming in and obviously trying to sort of go after YouTube, where does video now fit in and changing what that Tumblr is?
Sure. So one of the other things that we've had going on is like in the past 8 weeks alone, there's just been so much that I could talk about, but we came out with a new video product for both consumers and brands. And I love this improvement because we all know that we're multitasking and we're second screening and there's a TV on in the background. We're now like while you're watching and you're scrolling down through your stream, you can actually, with our new video post type, you can actually dock the video to the right side of your screen, and you can actually have a microsecond screen experience inside Tumblr. Consumers have totally embraced this and jumped all over it because what's cool about it is that, again, we're a smaller company. We only have 300 people. We don't have 1,000 people at Tumblr, right? It takes us longer to get to things. But when we do get to something and release our version of video, we always put a twist on it. And that twist, the idea that you can consume two things at once, is a reality. We all know that that's true. So I would encourage everyone to check out our new video. We've had video as a post type for 7 years, but the new improvement we've made to the product is like astounding. You're not going to have an experience like that anywhere else, and brands have totally jumped in. They've started to put a lot more effort into branded video content, and a great stat for everyone is that video is actually our fastest growing post type. It's double the growth of photos, which everyone assumes we're in a visual language and it's all about photos, but video has really rocketed upwards, especially micro, short-form, snackable video. With Yahoo, right now it's a Tumblr-only thing, but as you've seen with some of our other brand offerings, like we had sponsored posts, and that eventually allowed flighting up onto Yahoo to give a brand access to an 800 million reach. I can't say if that's coming or not, but I would say that there's like a pattern with things coming out on Tumblr and then eventually us finding a way to work with Yahoo there as well.
You all right?
Hi.
I work in the video game space. I have kind of two-part question for you. First of all, for an unknown brand in the Tumblr space,
Okay, sure. So I'll take the first part. So top 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like, I mean, this is something that even I have my own blog, and I'm constantly like criticizing myself because I do not follow this rule as much as I should be. But it's consistently and rigidly finding a way to translate your brand objectives into passion points. Because the truth is you want to sell something, and that's totally okay. That's the way the world works. The other truth is that everyone on Tumblr already knows that. They know that you're there to sell something or to build a community and then sell them something, or to blank, 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 and then sell them something. We all know that. That's kind of like the name of the game. But brands that have an ability to translate that core objective into a passion, into passion that's represented through content, have a lot of success. So Lexus with sendthemasignal.tumblr.com, you know, they want people to buy cars or to have awareness that the new IS is coming out, but they're not talking about that. They decide to basically create a Tumblr that casts a whole bunch of models in using surreal, aggressive, abstract, black and white photography. Their passion was avant-garde, abstract, surreal, and black and white photography, and they created content around that and appealed to those communities, who then began to follow the blog for the content. And every now and then they talked about the car. Dennys, their passion is really to let people know that they understand the next generation and how they speak. So they make content about that using media and remixed media. They're not telling people to like download a coupon and come in, because it's already embedded inside the strategy. So that ability to translate like a brand pillar into a passion point is huge. That's something we help with all the time. And then another one is using social media as your focus group. Right, so earlier when we were talking about mistaking your way across the finish line, you can put 30 posts up and you might be like, oh man, I don't know which one to highlight with media, but your audience is already telling you, because across those 30 posts, you're gonna begin to see certain pops, and those are the ones that your audience is engaging with and liking. Those are the ones you should probably put some dollars behind, and you should probably then rejig your creative development team to make more content like that. A great example of a brand doing that would be Hyundai. They had a World Cup blog. They built their actual website on Tumblr, which is a new trend we're seeing where brands are locating their websites on the platform. So becausefootball.com, and they rejigged their entire production budget for content so that they could maintain a leanness, just like a startup. And it was fascinating to see them do it. They would release 10 or 20 posts. They would see social media engage with certain ones. They would find commonalities in those 2 to 3 posts, and then they would have their production team go make more content like that. So they rejigged their budget. That informed how they flighted their media. It allowed them to stay on the platform longer, and it gave them record-breaking levels of engagement. And that's a case study that we could definitely share with everyone in the room. That's one we've released.
So, but what about unknown brands?
Hyundai was a total unknown. They'd never. Or do you mean unknown as in coming on, or like unknown as like not yet defined as a brand?
Exactly, yeah. So like new video games that are coming out that nobody has heard of. Driving people to a platform is one thing that can be bought and paid for, but as far as engagement is concerned, and why people would give a shit that, your game is on Tumblr.
Right. So coming from the movie studio side, we always talked about competitive titles, right? And also this idea of conquesting, which is to basically understand the genre that your property is in and what are the tent poles within that genre that have had success, and then keywording down that path. So if you did have a new property, outside of understanding how you line up with a passion, whether it's swordplay or design or, like a lot of games right now are going down the like hyper minimalist puzzle movement, right? Tying into the design community or the minimalism community. Just because it's a game doesn't mean that they're going to look at it any differently than a piece of furniture or a beautiful shoe. So representing your game through passions, you can have passions that are really narrowly defined, like nail art involving skeletons, and that's actually a community, or sinks. The sink fandom on Tumblr is gigantic. Like, who knew, right? People always call bullshit on that, but the sink fandom is huge. Or the messy bed fandom, like people that collect content around messy beds. But could that be something IKEA ties into, or an unknown bed manufacturer? Totally. Finding out where your niche passions are and also where your broad ones are, and making content that speak to those keywords is really important for a new brand. And it's actually an advantage because you can kind of define yourself however you want. You don't have official guidelines boxing you in. With larger brands, that's why it's more shocking to see Lexus or IBM, right? You would think one of the stodgiest and more dinosaur brands out there, but that's absolutely not the case. Their ability to redefine themselves through passions, whether it's innovation, technology, patents. They created a great new type of content called the patent GIF, where they reduced a 100-page white paper down into a series of patent GIFs, short snackable GIFs that explain the meaning of patents. It wouldn't have mattered if they were called IBM. It would only have mattered that they stumbled onto a passion point. They tied that into the science community, the innovation community, and they just took off. So I would say that's like something for all brands to think about.
Cool. One last one, David, for me. It may not be your area of expertise, but so a lot of the clients here have outsourced their community relationships to Facebook, right? 5 or 6 years ago. YouTube,
Yes.
Twitter, a lot of now the relationships are held over there. And then all of a sudden, they turn the corner, and I've got to now pay to reach these people. Should a
Yeah.
brand be concerned at all if I'm building my relationship now in Tumblr and now eventually having to actually pay to reach or have interaction with that? Is there any concern there if brands should have? I know I'm forcing you maybe to give up something here, but I want to...
I mean, everyone can just write it down. No way, never, absolutely not. Because it would actually just ruin the whole foundation of how we're built. Because we're built around communities, fandoms, for example, fandom culture. I think that we've all like accepted that these kids, if you want to call them kids, are pretty smart and are going to quickly move on to the next thing. I mean, there's a reason why it took us so long to try to figure out how to work with brands more. You could say it took like 7 years, essentially. It's a long time. But we would never mess with the brands community. And actually, one of the mottos that we try to point out is that brands deserve to own their own home. They don't, it's demeaning to have to rent your home or to have your community trapped in by a platform. Like it's bizarre. On Tumblr, you build a website, or you can make it a blog or a portfolio, and you own it. You can run an ad network on top of your website. We call them socially powered websites because it's as if there's a website, plus you're getting the social amplification of all that content, but you own that website. I can't see into it. I can't touch the code. You can run an ad network. You can run a store. You know, you can add a widget on top, and it's as robust as a Squarespace or WordPress. But it just so happens to have, if you log into the Tumblr network, it happens to have a dashboard and a traditional social network experience. So that front end, which anyone could visit, if you did go to Year in Review, you're going to a blog, but that front end, that's your audience, that's your website, that's your code, that's your everything. And I think that is probably one of the best value propositions for brands.
Awesome.
I have actually one more question.
Yeah, we got 2
so-
minutes, so keep going.
Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah, we
just
got
a
time.
quick question for you. So if you don't have the luxury of having someone on your team who can focus on Tumblr and figuring out what the next trends are all day long, some of us do and some of us don't. How do you find out? Like, how do you find out what these trending things are, that messy beds are a thing? Do you search? Is there a good resource for these people to go and find out what those things are?
Yeah, so in our mobile app, and a great way to learn about what are the next product innovations that we would eventually roll out to desktop and get behind is to experience the mobile app first, right? Like, everyone's down with the mobile first movement, but we've really released a lot of stuff there to help people in the realm of discovery of great content. So we've got a trending tags section, we have a trending blogs section where you can, stumble upon all of the stuff that's next that you might one day hear about on HuffPo or Atlantic or Reddit or so on. We have more stuff coming next year around discovery that I think is going to shock people big time, and it's going to be really helpful as far as surfacing. But search, at the end of the day, you can just type any keyword you want into Tumblr, and you're going to come up with amazing content. And taking that down a path and starting to click, you'll start to discover communities that congregate around sinks or unmade beds or the Cumber bitches or whatever it is that's next. I'd say that the thing that we receive most satisfaction from at Tumblr is proving to brands that there's a way to work with all those groups through content.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very
Sweet.
much for
Thank
joining.
you, guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Rebecca.